and happy Saturday, and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, June 29th, 2024. We're back again. Hopefully, we're back on schedule for a while. We were gone for a good bit for a month or so, but we hope to be able to be around most weekends leading up to the election, and we're going to talk about the election a lot today. But I need somebody to talk to. So, Val Atkinson here. Hey, Val.
Hello, Ed.
Val, there's not a whole bunch to talk about in terms of number of topics like we normally do. We normally cover 7 or 8 different topics every show. Uh, I think there's three big topics in the lead into the show. You saw clips from the debate, and I use that term loosely because I think we have an opinion about what went on. That it wasn't necessarily a debate in the way that I would have structured it to the advantage of Joe Biden if I was his handlers. But I'll let you talk about that some. So let's back up. So Thursday night, uh, two guys who were running for president stood up there and were supposed to spend an hour or so talking about why you should vote for them. One of those people got up there and lied nearly every time they opened their mouth. The other person struggled a lot to, put together, I think, a coherent uh, message. A lot because of the person standing next to them were lying. So I will divulge this. Donald Trump was the one lying, and and Joe Biden was the one who was struggling to put together that argument that he was the best person for the job. So if you remember last week, Val, we said that it was a bad idea to have the debate in the first place. So after seeing it, let's go back to that. Was it still a bad idea to have this debate, and then we can go from there?
It was a horrible idea. I have no idea what Joe Biden's handlers were expecting to get out of this, what the expectations were. My best guess is that they thought they could maybe move the needle ever so slightly because there were too many polls that had Joe Biden and Donald Trump tied or had Donald Trump slightly ahead. I think that they thought that they could have a debate that when it was all over, somebody said, I kind of like Joe. He's an honest guy. Trump lies. And I think I'll vote for Joe. And the needle moves a little bit, and you come out of the debate, and now Joe Biden is 3 or 4, 5, 6 points ahead. That's what they were expecting. The handlers, and I did a little research and found out who some of these guys were. They were either paid staffers or what I call informer staffers left over from Obama, maybe even going all the way back to Clinton. People like Chester James Carville. I love his first name. Uh, Carville, David Plouffe, David Axelrod, and a new one that I just found out, Anita Dunn. She's a white female. These people, some of them are on Venus and some are on Mars. I don't know which, but few of them are on planet Earth. They have some way outside the line views on what American politics are in the 21st century. And these are the type of people, I'm not saying exact people, but these are the type of people that's getting into Joe Biden's ear and into the ear of the paid strategists. These are not paid strategists that I'm talking about now. They're getting into the ear of the paid strategists, telling them, oh, yeah, this is a great idea. Let's go debate. I mean, I was watching one show the other day, yesterday, and David Plouffe, was saying, we've got to determine when is going to be the best time to have the second debate. And I'm saying, my goodness, what is Joe Biden going to do on a second debate that he couldn't do in the first debate? What were the problems that he's going to overcome? Is he going to become a little bit more articulate? Is he going to become less stuttering? Is he going to take a lot of Prevagen, maybe, and get some memory back? What is he going to do better in this second debate, Mr. Pluff, that you want him to have? And it all boils down to one thing, Ed, and I'll say this and let it go. The difference between Joe Biden on Thursday night and Joe Biden on Friday in Raleigh, North Carolina was one thing, and it's called teleprompter. If Joe Biden were allowed to have a teleprompter Thursday, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about the problems that we're talking about right now. Joe Biden has become comfortable with the teleprompter. When he doesn't have one, he is in a situation where thoughts and ideas and facts don't come to him so readily, and things aren't so clear. It's called impromptu presentations. And he doesn't do well at that because of his age and other things, okay? So, Mr. Pluff, I remind you of this when you start scheduling a second debate. Or you're going to have teleprompters there. You're going to have the same result.
Well, I got a question about that. So why does Trump even schedule a second debate? What would be the incentive for him? You know, if I were his people, I would say, no, we're done. You know, it doesn't make any sense for us to do one. So are you saying that Pluff and him believe that Trump is willing to roll the dice? Because if the next time the rules are not going to be the same, all the rules, I think, favored Donald Trump. I think, you know, having him not be able to speak over Joe Biden and all those kind of things actually helped in this case because it helped to meter Donald Trump so that he would not be the general asshole that he normally is. Right? He was contained, and then but it also contained Joe Biden to a degree. And then to your bigger point about being able to speak extemporaneously and quickly on your feet is difficult enough. But when you have this situation where there's nobody in the room, there's no cheering, there's no anything at all, it's an uncharacteristic debate, right? It's not like you would normally have. Then it puts Joe Biden at a disadvantage because he also couldn't have his teleprompter or notes or, you know, support like you normally would have. Everything was set up against Joe Biden. So here's the question to that. What was CNN's goal here? If you look at CNN's roster of people they have on the air now, a lot of them have come from Fox, right? A lot of them have worked in Republican administrations, yada, yada, yada. And they've also tried to temper what they say so that they don't appear to be as to the left as, say, MSNBC. Is it because of the structure of the CNN corporate organization now who are trying to take Fox viewers away from Fox and they want to appear to be fair to Donald Trump? What is CNN's goal here?
Well, CNN scored a great coup in landing the contract in the first place, or landing the right to be the exclusive host for that whole piece. But CNN made a decision a long time ago, Ed, when Fox first started getting into trouble, that they were going to sort of decouple themselves from their left-wing partner, as it were, MSNBC. Many people in the industry, many viewers, and just regular folks saw that MSNBC and CNN were like two peas in a pod. And then there was Fox and some others, the Wall Street Journal and those kinds of people that were on the right. CNN saw an opportunity with Murdoch's problems to go in and become the new Fox to take over some of Fox viewers and patrons and get away from and put distance between themselves and MSNBC. And with the help of Jake Tapper, and I call him Little John, they've been doing a pretty good job of that. So I was concerned, to say the least, when I first heard that CNN was going to be the host for this. I knew that at best it was going to be a pro-Trump type of interview. And at worst, it was going to be an anti-Biden type of interview. And I was surprised pleasantly when a couple of times their question was repeated to Trump when he refused to answer the first question. They repeated again, you got another minute left. Do you want to try to answer the question? The question is. I thought that was a good idea, but I think they could have had integrated into their whole process and procedures some type of immediate, right away fact checking to be able to say this is not correct or whatever, because they allowed Trump to just lie. When you ask a question of an interviewee and you let them ramble on for 2 minutes, not answering the question, but talking about something totally unrelated to the nature of your question, you might as well not ask the question. You might as well say, hey, you got 2 minutes, sir, to talk about anything you want to talk about. I don't have a question, because that's what it ended up being. They would ask him a tough question. He said, well, first I want to talk about this. And he talked about something totally unrelated for 2 minutes. And then Biden didn't have the wherewithal to pick out certain things within that 2 minute time frame, saying, well, okay, first of all, you didn't answer the question, Mr. Trump. And the reason you didn't answer the question, because the real answer is this: you don't feel XYZ, or you've already done ABC. That's the reason you didn't answer the question. Now, my response to that, Mr. Interviewer, is, and go on with it that way. Joe Biden wasn't there. He couldn't do that. That's too much to retain, and too slick of a method of dealing with an interview process that way. But that would have been a good way to do it. But as you say, CNN didn't do enough to fact check. They allowed Trump. It might as well have been a monologue for Trump. We're going to pretend that we're asking you a question and we're going to let you talk about whatever you want. Here's your mic. And that's the way it was. And it was, if Biden hadn't been in the trouble that he was with his presentation, and the light could have been focused more on Donald Trump, we would have found out very clearly that Donald Trump was really ill prepared as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So to that point, Val, I want to play a clip. This is at the very beginning. Jake Tapper starts off by talking about the economy. And I want you to tell me what your first question would have been had you been Jake Tapper.
Let's begin the debate, and let's start with the issue that voters consistently say is their top concern: the economy. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump?
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president and what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible.
So Val, Joe Biden gives an answer. He says he was handed an economy that was in trouble. You know we were coming out of the pandemic, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think there's any question about that. If you look at the numbers, unemployment is still low. The inflation numbers came out. They were actually lower than what everybody's been saying they've been, yada, yada. I was in the airport, Val, and I've been in the airport almost every week for the last, 3-4 months. And I've never seen that many people traveling. somebody has some money somewhere. The construction, at least in our area, has not abated any at all. There is some money, and the economy is not as bad as they make it out to be. But if you're Jake Tapper, I'll tell you what my first question would have been is, uh, uh, Donald Trump has 34 convictions for felonies. Do you want? Can you address why he's not qualified to be president or qualified based on that? But that's me. What would your first question have been?
My first question out of the cut would have had to be with the process of being president. Both of you have been president before. Talk to us about the everyday workings of the presidency in terms of how much do you initiate actions and how much of it is that the actions are brought to you for your decision. Who really is making decisions in the background? How much do you have to know about what's going on the ground? How many people do you have around you that's making those decisions, doing that research? So is it a thing that you have to know everything, or is your job to surround yourself with capable people who can do the work themselves? Tell us about that. What are the inner workings? The reason I would go in with that approach, Ed, is I would want to make it clear that you don't need some Phi Beta Kappa in the office of the presidency. You need people in there has good judgment or good art, good understanding of the political process, good knowledge of history, and a commitment to serve the people of the United States of America. That's who you need. And the last thing you need is a con man that's going to tell you one thing and you know he's going to do something different. You know it because of what his past history and record has been. And CNN could have done a great service, and Jake Tapper, to the people of the United States and to the whole world by stop trying to be the new Fox and really do some things to help people make decisions about who they want the leader to be of the United States of America.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. In the few minutes we got left in this segment, here's the other thing. Uh, I continually hear this, saw about Joe Biden being old. And full disclosure, we both got AARP cards here, and we got a little bit of gray. You have said it on this program before. You and Joe Biden are not that far off in age, but neither is Donald Trump and Joe Biden, for that matter. But people age different, right? People are able to do. We can see some people that are 50 years old that look and act like they're 90 or 100, depending on how they take care of themselves. And one of the things that came up with, which was a little weird, I'm gonna play a clip and then we'll talk about it.
Club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way. And I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was willing to take a cognitive test. And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced them. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy when he was White House doctor. And then I took another one, a similar one. And one of them said they've never seen anybody ace him.
Thank you. President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, anyway, just take a look at what he says he is and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
So, Val, they were talking about their golf handicap. And the reason why I bring that up is because you golfed for a long time. You actually have on a shirt from one of the tournaments that you used to run, and that made me think about it. But this whole idea of what their relative health status is in their age, and so they try to talk about it in terms of their golf handicap and that kind of thing. it was a little bit silly, but at the same time, there is a point to be made about their real relative health and cognitive ability, right? Because Donald Trump started off by saying he had passed these cognitive tests, which he's fond of saying, and that his doctor said that he's fit or whatever. Clearly, Joe Biden is more fit, right? If you take the standard of weight and some of those other things. But cognitive ability is, I think, what everybody's concerned about. So again, I don't have to, disclose your age, but you have on here before. You and Joe Biden are just days apart in terms of age, and
10 days.
yeah. And so talk to me real quick and try to assure people, because you come on here and talk about every single thing in the world, and so does Joe Biden as president, because the job of president is to corral this group of people that have different views or whatever, and it's more of a management position. So talk to me about how age plays into this, at least from your perspective.
Well, from my perspective, age, the biggest component that age touches on here is experience. And what are you bringing to the table? What can you reach back and get and learn from your experiences that will play a significant role in the job at hand that's coming up? That is the biggest thing about age. And it has nothing to do, or should have nothing to do, with your immediate capability in terms of setting up, getting in some type of barbershop debate with your presidential opponent. It has nothing to do with who's going to be the best president. I mean, if some of the measurements that some of the right wing would have us believe that will be in play, Franklin Delano Roosevelt never would have been president, never have gotten reelected all of those times. Nor would probably Teddy. We could go back and talk about their favorite, Ronald Reagan. I mean, you could go back in history and talk about a lot of different presidents and say, well, I mean, they weren't coming in on some shining horse, white knight on a horse riding in saving everybody. But this is all Donald Trump knows. He is a barbershop arguing con man. And in that type of environment, you don't need to be correct. You don't need to have data in front of you. You don't need to have great recall. You have to have good style. It's a matter of style instead of substance. And that's why Donald Trump changes subjects so much. He's asked a question that he knows nothing about. He refuses to answer that. He goes down the road that he does know something about, and he talks about that for 2 minutes and gives it back to them. And unfortunately, we didn't have a media outlet nor a candidate that could take advantage of and let the world know what Trump was doing or was not doing, because that would have been a big deficit in the scorekeeping against Trump, that he never answered questions. Should have been some fact checking there, that when he did try to answer them, he lied about things, and he based on rules of debate, he lost that debate.
Yeah.
But here we are now talking about removing the guy who won the debate from office because of style, because he didn't have control of the English language and he couldn't remember. Well, what do you want as a president? Somebody who stutters and can't find the right word, loses his way, but has a good heart, has great experience, knows what he's doing, knows how to surround himself by the right kind of people who can do these things that he can't do. You want that guy? Or do you want somebody who will lie, who will never tell you the truth, and who is incompetent and incapable of doing the job that he's been assigned to do? Which one do you want?
Well, that's a good question to end the segment on. And when we come back, we're going to try to answer that. Because if I had a choice between somebody who was convicted 34 counts and also been found to have sexually assaulted somebody and and you just go down a list of things, I think I'd choose the guy that's the nicer guy that seems to want the best for folks, and as opposed to the other guy. I hear some music, so let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll pick up on that. And Val, I want to talk about what is the likelihood that Joe Biden can make some inroads in places like Georgia and North Carolina, and we'll be right back after this business.
Even the mighty might not see it coming. It's prediabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. It's Saturday, June 29th, 2024. We spent the first segment talking about the debate, as it were, on Thursday night. I think we said it last week, Val, that it was not a good idea to even have it in the first place, but they did. It happened. Now it's forever in history, right? It's on tape. The 40 million odd people who watched at least a piece of it have some opinion about it. One of the things that happened after the debate, if you looked at the post-mortems, right, as soon as it was over, I turned to Fox. They were giddy because they were making fun of, Joe Biden and his stumbles. But the people over at MSNBC, they act like they were at a funeral. Mm-hmm. And particularly the people who Joy Reid and some of the other ones said that they were on the phone with other Democrats during the debate, and they talked about how it was causing sort of a panic amongst the chattering class, right? Without contextualizing, I think, the part about Donald Trump being a liar, right? They focus more on style over substance, like you were talking about when we left. In your postmortem, let's deconstruct this a little bit more before we move on, because I do want to talk about Joe Biden's chances in a place like North Carolina or Georgia. But in your postmortem, did you look at some of those other outlets like a MSNBC, and when they were like basically throwing in the towel and saying that Biden needed to be replaced, how do you think that went over to the people who watch this stuff? Is it just those people who just talk amongst themselves because the audience for those outlets has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk? Maybe it's just a few million people. It's not the other people who were watching the track meet and were watching, whatever else they were watching. A lot of people weren't watching the debate, clearly, right? But the way they did the postmortem made it seem like Joe Biden had actually died on stage, and the only thing to do was to wheel him out and put Gavin Newsom up there. So talk about that real quick before we move on.
But you're absolutely right, Ed. When I first heard them start analyzing the debate, it took them a little while, and they would slowly get into it. And after a while, all of them were saying the same thing. This is the worst thing that could have happened. Joe Biden has got to go. He just can't make it. I don't know why they did this in the first place. When they were, a few hours earlier, a couple of days earlier, they were out there beating the drum, selling the debates. You got to tune in for the debate. Come on, tune in, because they're trying to sell commercial spots, okay? And that sort of thing. And now it's just horrible. And now, first of all, I'll say this to those kind of people. Get a life. You're on the wrong track here, because Joe Biden can still win. Right, I'm saying it right now on the 29th of June. Joe Biden can still win on November the 5th. The second thing is, it is inane, stupid, and all those other kind of things to talk about replacing Joe Biden. Because who are you going to replace him with that won't split the party? That's the exact first result that you're going to have. I don't care who you replace him with, there are going to be people mad at you, so mad at you that you replaced him with that person that they won't vote for that person in November. And I think it's going to have a residual effect as well. It just won't be for the presidency. It'll happen all up and down the ballot. You're going to have congressional seats that are going to be lost and won because they're still ticked off, pissed off that you took their man out of a seat that he earned and probably could have won the presidency. So I'm not voting for any Democrat, okay? So it would have been a party splitter that I don't know, it may have taken decades to recover from. Because, and I say decades to recover from it, because just imagine a Republican presidency, a Republican House, that they increase the margin by which they have the majority, a takeover of the U.S. Senate by Republicans, and a younger MAGA Supreme Court. When I say younger, I mean a replacement for Alito and Thomas by 40-year-olds that's going to be on the bench another 40 years. So however long, okay? Can you imagine that? You want that just to say that Biden had a rough night on a debate? Because if you have that, and I know you're going to get into the course a little later on, talking about Chevron and some other things, but if you have that kind of circumstance and situation, you will never, ever recover from it. It'll be so big of a problem that it'll be locked in. The pendulum will never swing back the other way.
Yeah, and that's the concern here. So 24 hours after the debate, Joe Biden's in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Let's look at this clip and then we'll talk about why he's in North Carolina again.
Join me in welcoming our guest of honor to the state of North Carolina, the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Thank you, North Carolina. I get in trouble with my mom looking down in heaven if I don't say, please excuse my back. I apologize. It's good knowing you have my back.
So, Val, that Joe Biden had a lot of energy. But you're in a different environment, right? You're speaking to the people who are there to support you,
and you got a teleprompter.
You got a teleprompter. You got a popular governor there, Roy Cooper. You got some other things that you could talk about, like the need to elect Josh Stein over Mark Robinson, yada yada yada. Right? So he can talk about things differently. You're not getting a question from Jake Tapper that sort of paints you in a corner, and you're not having to respond to Donald Trump. The Joe Biden that showed up there in that clip we saw and also spoke at the State of the Union was one that the Republicans said, he got to be on drugs or, whatever they were saying, to say that he was, hopped up on something or whatever. And that's the only reason why he was better at the State of the Union. I'll be curious to see what they say about his speech in North Carolina. But to the bigger point, Joe Biden's in North Carolina again. He's been here at least 5 or 6 times that I can think of in the last year. Kamala has been here more times, right? And that means to me that he is campaigning in North Carolina. And he's campaigning in North Carolina because you have to get one additional state, I think, that you didn't get the last time to solidify this thing and win it. And they think that they can get North Carolina because they were able to get Georgia, because they've also been in Georgia a lot. Here's the question. Is North Carolina really in play? And if it is, why? And what's the realistic chances that Joe Biden can win North Carolina?
Well, answer your first question, yes. Carolina is in play. North Carolina is in play. And second question, yes, Joe Biden can win North Carolina. And the reason it's in play is that, thank goodness, although gerrymandering affects congressional districts as well as legislative districts, it doesn't go down to the county level. And so that means that North Carolina has an opportunity to win the Democrats have an opportunity to win the popular vote. And because the electoral colleges are want to take all piece for the state of North Carolina and get all 16 electoral college votes. So yes, numerically, it is still a possibility, and it can make that happen. The deal is getting people out to vote. The deal is overstepping roadblocks and impediments put in place intentionally by the far right to make it difficult for people to vote. Moving precincts at the last minute, requiring all kinds of crazy things in terms of being able to register and being able to turn out to vote. Everything short of literacy tests and poll tax they are trying to do. They've already gotten away with the packing and the cracking and stacking, all of that through Supreme Court decisions determining that the district lines drawn and sanctioned by the Supreme Court of the state of North Carolina can stay in effect. And who knows, we may see them pick up a seat or two from there. Everybody's looking at 11-3 right now. And it could be even worse. But even though we have that, as I said earlier, counties don't matter in the electoral college. States matter in the electoral college. So we can still win if we can have a great turnout and have those people in their right mind pulling the lever for the right man. That's always a lot of ifs there.
Yeah.
But to your question, yes, we can still win. It's going to come down to turnout and motivation. So we got to get people in their right mind and stop people from saying it doesn't matter. It's all the same. And I don't know if I'm going to vote or not, or Trump ain't done nothing to me. All of those crazy things, we got to remove that from our lexicon and get people to get out and cast their votes.
Yeah, yeah. You know, one of the things, Val, is those young people. Joe Biden talked a little bit about it during the debate, and he talked about it here in Raleigh as well, about how he's tried to, get the student loan forgiveness done. That there's impediments and roadblocks in the way for that, but I think that would help him with the number of young voters. He also talked about the reversal of Roe during the debate, and Donald Trump brags all the time that he's the one who reversed Roe. Excuse me, and but he also says this other crazy thing about it went back to the states and everybody wanted it back at the state. Nobody wanted it back at the states, because that means every friggin' state has some weird, trigger law, like in Arizona, where they went all the way back to 1867 or some crazy nonsense, right? Nobody wanted that. It confuses things. It puts women at risk, whatever, blah, blah, blah. In the time we got left in this segment, I do want to talk about the one case in particular, and we'll talk about the court in detail in the final segment. But uh, the, the Supreme Court has been sloppy lately. And again, a leak occurred. And the leak was around a case in Idaho about whether or not you could do an emergency abortion and so on and so forth. And the court, surprisingly, I don't know if surprising, but I guess it is in light of the court that we have, ruled that no, you can do an emergency abortion because that's a federal thing, right? That hospitals are required to provide care so the person doesn't die, right? And if that includes abortion, it supersedes whatever the state law is prohibiting abortion. Talk to me real quick in the time we got left in this segment about how the Democrats could make more hay of those kind of things, and say, listen, you're putting yourself at risk. Back to the point that you were making earlier, you could have a court that has two 40-year-olds on there that will never leave in your lifetime, that will entrench, and maybe not go along with what I just said, that you can have emergency health services. How do you get to young people to get them to even understand that it's not that Donald Trump hasn't done anything to them personally or whatever else, that there's these other issues? How do you get the people that are on TikTok all the time and trying to be influencers or whatever? Does somebody have to go to that medium and platform to try to get to those younger voters?
Well, that's what David Plouffe thinks. He thinks that one of the problems in the Democratic strategy is that we are trying to communicate with a bunch of young folks over the primary airways, the New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC. And he says that these young folks ain't watching or reading any of that stuff, that they are on X and TikTok and whatever is out there, Instagram, Spotify, whatever. They're doing all of that kind of stuff. I am not so sure that that's the way to go. And the reason for that is young folks haven't gotten to the point that they know how to really traverse these platforms. And more importantly, they don't have a mechanism to discern truth from falsehoods. And they look at all of these platforms out there, one saying one thing, one saying another. They don't know what the real sources are of the information that they're getting. They don't know if it's coming from Russia, from China, from some right-wing white nationalist, or wherever. They just say, hey, I saw on my phone that it said that he didn't do this, or that he said it. That is something that I don't think there's an answer to right away, Ed, and it's problematic. And it's killing our democracy right now. Something is going to have to be done about it. And there are some states who are doing some things right now to minimize or to maximize the time that students can spend on their devices during the school day and when it can happen and all of that. That's going to be the route, but it comes way, that solution it falls way short of being measurable in terms of affecting this year's election coming up. It won't happen. But you can't contact young folks on the traditional media outlets without going through the internet and contacting them where they reside all the time. If you see a young person out in the street, I guarantee you, if they're riding a bike, or better still, if they're standing at a bus stop or walking down the street, they have a device in their hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
99 times out of 100, they have a device in their hand. And I don't know how you get around that. I wish I had the answer.
Well, Val, we need to take a break. I hear some music in my ear, but one thing I will say is, I bet you they don't have current events anymore in school. You remember when you used to have to cut out an article on Friday and then talk about a current event? I bet you there's not just the current teenagers, but they're probably 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds who have never had a newspaper in their hand.
Right.
I'm talking about a daily newspaper, the Raleigh News and Observer, the New York Times, the Washington Post. They've never held one in their hand and read the editorial from one of those papers. But anyway, like I said, I hear some music. So let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to dig into the Supreme Court a little bit and wrap this up. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this.
We just got this case. We were told as the decisions have continued to be released from the Supreme Court, this one is now officially released. Of course, our team is going to read into the decision to compare it with the decision that had been put out on the docket yesterday, make sure that we are getting everything correct as we move forward in our conversation around this. But I want to ask you, Neil, as we let our team look more closely at this decision, what are you looking at specifically here? And can you also weigh in on what we heard, Anthony and Lisa discussing about the Supreme Court knowing exactly what it's doing and the idea that they may have some political calculus here to not give a definitive answer on this particular case?
Yeah, so looking at the decision that was just released just in the last half minute, it does look like the decision that we saw briefly on the website from Bloomberg. So I don't notice any discernible differences. Here's why that's so important. It's basically the 2-year anniversary of the Supreme Court issuing the Dobbs decision and overturning Roe versus Wade, which was one of the most massive changes to the law in our lifetimes.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. The same way you plan each detail for those moments, start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. It's Saturday, June 29th. I encourage you to tell your friends about the program. Have them subscribe. You can go to Spotify. You can also go to any of the fine podcasting platforms. You can also go to thedealwithedclark.com and subscribe to the RSS feed. And then you don't have to worry about when we're going to be on. And you'll always have it. You can also, if you choose, just bookmark it and check out the website whenever and see. But you can also go to Facebook and find thedealwithedclark.com on Facebook. And we post a program there. So we have it in so many different places, Val, that there's no excuse for you not subscribing and following what we do. Val, we were talking about young people when we left and making a little bit of a joke that, they've never cut an article out of the paper for current events. And they haven't. They haven't touched a newspaper or anything like that because the reality is times change. Right. And the world keeps moving. But one of the things that's odd about America is that this notion that these 9 people walking around in gowns, black gowns, are the arbiters of everything. And we frequently do this on this program. We talk about history and try to put things into context. We've talked about this before. One of my blog posts from a few years ago was about the 11th Amendment, right? And the 11th Amendment says you can't sue a state, whatever, blah, blah. And the context around it was there was this guy that the United States owed money to in Georgia because he had provided, weapons or whatever for the war. And then the United States says, well, we don't have the money. Georgia says, I don't have the money to pay you. So they decided to create an amendment saying that you can't go after him, that he could not go after them to try to recoup his money. And so there's a whole amendment, the 11th Amendment, that says you can't sue the government for certain things. It doesn't mean that that's the right thing, but nobody's re-examined that after 200 years almost, right? So here's the question, Val. Were those 9 people, and at the time, I think it was 5 people on the Supreme Court at the beginning, then it became 7, and then at one point, I think it was 11 or whatever. Those people used to get in a horse and buggy and go sit court in their district. That's what the Supreme Court did. And they would settle cases on property. They would settle cases on stuff that you wouldn't even think the Supreme Court does. But the context that we live in now, we act as if those 9 people can make a decision about anything and that they know everything. And one of the things they don't know, I can guarantee you this, is how many particles of lead in the water is dangerous. So I'll explain to you why I put that on the table. But let's back up. Do the history for me. How did we get to the point where we believe that the Supreme Court is, whatever they say, is sacrosanct at the time they say it, and then it's good until they don't say it anymore? They change their mind. When did that happen, and how did it happen? And should we be thinking differently about the court? Like I said, adding justices and that kind of thing.
Let me answer that last one first. Yes, we should be thinking differently about adding justices to the court, because as you mentioned, it was not always 9 people on the court. It's been different numbers. So we need to do that again, particularly when you have lifetime appointments. It's going to become increasingly problematic. Term limits is one of the things that's got to come through and be implemented on the court, term limits. And the court needs to be increased to at least 15, between 15 and 18 people. That's the only way we're going to get past and get around the draconian measures this court has placed on this country. Because you can't just say, as Anita Dunn tried to say, she tried to say, and I quote, "We need to go out and vote to elect a Congress that will write laws to prevent the courts from taking away more of our rights." Hey, how are you going to vote to put people in place when legislators at the state level are choosing their own voters and then redistricting congressional districts so they make sure people in their party win? How are you going to vote to change that? It's ridiculous. You can't do it. So we have an opportunity now, between now and January the 20th of 2025, Joe Biden will be president of the United States. I don't care what happens on November the 5th. He'll be president of the United States until through January 19th of 2025. And he has an opportunity to do some things. He has the Senate, and the House is so close that he could have some things going his way there. Something has to be done now, because if we change presidents, if we go through a process and they take back the Senate and increase their margins in the House, Ed, this is going to be a different country than what you and I have known it to be. And I want to go on record right now as saying that it's going to be totally different than what you think it ought to be. Getting back to the Supreme Court of the United States, just like a lot of other things, got their reputation for what they're doing when they got into the race business, with the Scott decision, with Plessy, all of those kind of things. Supreme Court Justice Roger Taney saying things like the black man has no rights that any white man is bound or due to respect. They become big time. And of course, everybody wants to talk about the Brown decision in 1954. That wasn't the biggest thing that they did. You know, you can go back and talk about a lot of decisions they've done. I think Loving was a big decision that they ran across. Definitely Shelby County v. Holder, Citizens United, Chiavallo v. Washington, when you talk about redistricting and you talk about electoral college and faithful electors, and they have had their hands in so much that affect the general lives of people. And these people are not accountable, Ed. to the citizens of the United States of America. They don't run for office. They don't even have a code of ethics to govern their activities and what they do. They are appointed. They can get appointed by someone who did not get the popular vote. Here's a man by the name of Donald Trump who never got won the popular vote either time he ran for the presidency in 16 or 20. He never won the popular vote. And yet he has more people on the Supreme Court right now than any living or dead president of the United States of America. And that's got to change if we want the court to change. You need fundamental change. You can't be trying to do things around the edges, at the margins, we like to call it. Can't do it. It's too late for that. We need mega changes. The way the court operates, the people on the court, term limits, whatever you need to do to rectify and even reverse some of the things that have gone on. If you allow this court to continue the way it is, it will irreparably harm the United States of America beyond the point of repair, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to remind you, you're listening to or watching The Deal. I'm Ed Clark, that's Val Atkinson. And, Val, week after week for the last, 30 some years that you and I have interacted, we've bemoaned the influence that certain people can have over everybody else's life to the detriment of other people. And one of the things that drives a lot of this, and we talk about a lot here, is white grievance. Evangelical white Christians in places like Iowa and Nebraska who have an undue influence over, how things happen. That somebody, because the Senate is, two votes for every state, regardless of the size of the state. I've been traveling a lot, and I was in New Hampshire and Vermont recently, and when you look around, there's nobody there. I mean, in a place like Vermont, 600,000 people. I was in Oregon this week, just driving between Portland and Eugene, Oregon, there's a lot of nothing. And the state capital in Oregon is Salem, which is a town that's not as big as Cary, North Carolina, and it's the state capital. But you have these people in places, far-flung places like Montana and Idaho, that have an undue influence, like the court. This whole notion that there's only 2 senators from each state and they have the equal standing. And then you have these 9 people on the court that can make a decision about anything. And one of the decisions this week I talked about earlier was the abortion one, right? And you say, if they decided that, maybe they got some reason to that. But no, they turn right around, Val, and say that in the Chevron case, that the people who know in the federal agency that oversees that, or there's a case from the SEC, same thing, that no, the regulators can't decide. It has to go back to some lower court of some people who are also probably lifetime appointees on the federal bench, right? Who have nobody watching them. They're the ones that are going to decide. So I could court shop, right? Like they did the case where they tried to outlaw the morning after pill. They go to a court in Texas and give it to a judge, and the judge says, oh, that medicine is dangerous. It's off the market. Now, luckily, they stayed there and that didn't go through, but you would have to fight that all the time, Val. So talk to me about this Chevron case and why if the courts get into trying to determine whether or not 8 parts per billion of lead is dangerous or not, as opposed to the people who know, the real experts.
Well, this is a case almost up there with Hobbs v. Dobbs v. Jackson, the abortion thing. This is something that the alt-right has been pushing for eons, Ed. They wanted to get what they called the deep state out of the business and out of the way of business. They want to take away the regulatory powers, and this decision basically does that. Take away the regulatory powers of the various agencies. And you mentioned, lead and water and those kinds of things. That's the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. I mean, they have tons of PhDs there that have their doctoral degrees in chemistry and biology and those kinds of things, that spent their whole life. They've been in federal government for 20, 25, 30 years. And they should be making a lot more money because government doesn't pay that much compared to the private sector. But they love what they do. They're good at what they do, and they're needed to do that job. And what Chevron does, that decision, it takes away what they do and gives that right to make those decisions to the Supreme Court. And the last time I looked, what do the Supreme Court guys have? They got a JD and a long robe. I mean, none of them have PhDs in the sciences and those kinds of things. And you get beyond the sciences and you could get into some other things that they're going to be making decisions on. I mean, there's the FCC out there, there's the Federal Trade Commission. There are a lot of places out there that make regulatory decisions that you're going to allow the Supreme Court to do that now. I mean, some of these guys are not that good themselves. Like if you think all of the decisions are coming from Clarence Thomas's brain, what do you think his staff is doing? They're the one doing all the research. They're the ones, the staffs of these Supreme Court justices are the ones, the clerks as we call them, are the ones who are doing the research, the filings, the everything. And sometimes they are making decisions that the actual justice themselves adopts and comes to the rest of us and say, I have decided, and your clerks decided that for you. So we have got to, Ed, it is just paramount. I think the Chevron decision that they just came up with to take away the regulatory rights of particular agencies and give it to the Supreme Court is the last straw in the balance that we are trying to wage here before this becomes an all-out plutocracy with the rich running and having all power and control over everything, and the rest of us just at the table begging for crumbs. That's the way it's going to end up if we don't stop and do something about it. Because the rich don't know how to do a damn thing except ask for more. Some of them think that when they see a poor man eating, poor folks got too much money and they need to do something about it. And they need to go find a way to get that money back. Yeah. And you're not going to run a country for very long or a system for very long that has as this base concept of having rich people trying to get every penny they can out of the pockets of everybody else. It's not going to work.
Yeah. As I saw a story this week, Val, where executive compensation again has gone up, right? Under their executives, like at Boeing, an airline that, been dropping planes out of the sky and windows popping out on planes. I was on a plane on a runway in Atlanta earlier this week where it was a brand new plane, Val, and they had to reboot the plane. Because they couldn't figure out how to get it started back up. So they shut all the power off and brought it back up. But that executive at Boeing who testified earlier this week, he got $36 million before he left, as a yearly compensation. He was rewarded for doing bad and shady things. To your point, there's some really rich people in the world, and I don't count other people's money, right? I don't. We're capitalists. I run a business, right? We've all have worked somewhere where we wanted a paycheck, and we wanted the paycheck to be as much as possible because we thought our skills were valuable enough to charge whatever we charge for our services, or whatever our paycheck said should have been commensurate to what our skill level was. However, there are some outliers in the society. Elon Musk, who has created a phony organization, Tesla, that builds crappy cars, but he's venerated as some kind of genius, right? And so every Cybertruck, those ugly things that you've seen on the road, have been recalled because it just wasn't ready. But that's the kind of person. But it's also the kind of person like Donald Trump, who's a fake rich person that people said, "Oh, I'm going to vote for him in 2016 because he's a businessman. He's a successful businessman." But it turns out he wasn't at all. What he was is a front so that things like the court could be stacked in their favor. I think the most dangerous thing about Donald Trump has been that he has been able to influence the court to a degree that no other president. And you said that three people. Who's appointed three people, right? Nobody in modern history. And if he's reelected, he has a chance of then replacing the other two because Clarence Thomas and Alito, they got enough trouble that, they may want to go ahead and leave, and they'll feel safe to leave because if Donald Trump is there, he's going to appoint somebody worse than them, more MAGA than they are. So I'll leave that at that. In the time we got left here, last week, we talked about some book this dude wrote named Val Atkinson. I want you to mention that book again, Val, because I think in light of what we talked about today, it's very germane and people need to pick it up. Tell us about the book that you just finished.
Well, Ed, it's the second edition of my second book, which the title is Distractions, Distortions, Deceptions, and Outright Lies. And it's published by the Traffic Publishing Company. You can go out to Amazon and pick it up, or you can find it on some of your bookstores starting today, the 29th. It should be in some of your bookstores. And it's in paperback and hardback. I think it's reasonably priced. And if you'd like to have a special order autographed to you, just contact me at ncblackvote@gmail.com. Again, that's ncblackvote@gmail.com, and we'll figure out a way how to get all that to you. But I think it's very apropos. The timing is great because of the upcoming election on November the 5th. There's a lot of things in there about that. Talks about how we got to be where we are now. What are some of the things we need to do and what's down the road for us if we don't do them. So it's very appropriate. I even have a bent on this book, Ed, because of what motivated me to write the book in the first place was that when I was teaching, I used to go around asking people all the time, what are some supplemental books I can use for this particular course? Everybody knows what the primary books are and but I like to always recommend supplemental readings for my students and And one professor told me, he says, Val, you're always asking people about supplemental books. Why don't you write one yourself? So that's what got me started on this one. I said, maybe I will. So that's what this book is about as well. Not only it is a good reader for the average person, it's not written at some graduate level, educational level, but it is written for the average person to read, comprehend, and understand. And also it can be used by professionals as supplemental materials to go along with some of the things that they're teaching in the area of political science or just general history. Yeah. So Yeah, it's a good book. Go out there, read the introduction, read a few things about it, and recommend it to your friend. You know, Christmas is coming up. I've always thought that a good present for Christmas always is a book.
Yep.
To some of your friends. It tells them what you think they ought to be looking at and thinking about. And also it shows them that you care about them and their knowledge of things going on in the world. So maybe a good Christmas present for some of your friends.
Well, the stocking stuffer of for this Christmas will be
Yes.
Distractions by Val Atkinson. You know, Val, I bring that up not only because I think it's a good book and we should promote it. The other part of it too is, I think, again, in the 30 some odd years that we've been talking back and forth in our little salon where we talk about issues or whatever, is that things have changed and not changed at the same time. That there are people on the right who figured out that they just needed some broad topics that they could hit on over and over again: God, guns, gays, gestation, right? And talk about those things. Everybody has the talking points. Donald Trump tried it during the debate, which is where we started today. He talked about immigration, right? He kept saying that the problem is these people taking black jobs or whatever. We didn't even get into that, but that's a whole nother thing. But they picked a few issues, Val, that they've honed in on, that they're focusing on, and that I think they believe that they've entrenched themselves to the point where they can't be removed, right? Where they think that they're safe. And it almost is that to that point. That's why this particular election is vitally important, and that you do pay attention. You don't have to be, folks like me and Val who live and breathe this stuff, but be aware that if your wife or significant other has an ectopic pregnancy and they're in Idaho, there was a chance that she could have died because she would not have been able to get an abortion services to save her life. So keep that in mind, and also keep in mind, go buy Val's book. Anyway, I hear some music in my ear. That means we need to get out of here. I do encourage you to come back to us the next time. Like I said, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your fine podcasts. But you can also go to the website, subscribe to the RSS feed. You never have to worry about knowing when we're going to be on. It'll just be there, and you can see it. So in the meantime, go out and do something good for somebody today, like we always tell you to do, and we'll see you next time.